As a photographer, I've been shooting weddings for years. I've shot couples from different backgrounds, different ages, different perspectives. Given I'm just a photographer, I'm not a priest or a philosopher or some kind of minister or something. You'd think I'd be able to see it. I'd be able to figure it out, what adds up to a successful marriage, which ones are going to make it and which ones aren't. But I can't. When I meet a couple, they're happy. They're in love. Call me an easy sell, but I believe them. I'm optimistic. I look at them, I say to myself, these kids got it. This is going to last. I couldn't possibly question it. But the truth is, I have no idea. Okay, so you meet two people who do pull it off, and they stay together. You ask yourself, how do they do that? What's the formula? What are the ingredients to something like that?
I want you to imagine a view of the Earth from outer space, looking down upon this gorgeous blue and green planet, and zooming down specifically, let's say to North America, with their beautiful coastlines and the breathtaking wilderness and the canyons and the valleys and the lakes. And imagine now eons after all of this was created in its original glory, that mankind and governments moved in and started drawing lines in the sand. Now, this is where Canada is going to start, and Mexico is going to be over here, and Kansas and Utah, and drawing all these lines and boundaries and definitions. In a certain sense, this is a fitting metaphor for marriage, something that had been created by God at the very beginning. And then eons later, governments have shown up and made rules and regulations. Now, this is how the contract would work, and this is how prenuptial agreements work, and child custody laws. And sometimes, in the midst of all these rules and regulations, we lose sight of the beautiful creation that preceded all of man's regulations having to do with it. What we need to realize is just like North America as a landmass existed long before governments, so too did marriage itself exist as an institution because it was created by God long before the government had any laws and rules and regulations about it. But sometimes we need to put aside all of our preconceived ideas and expectations and notions of marriage from a legal perspective to step back and open our hearts to perhaps what God's original plan is for man and woman.
We all want to find happiness in marriage, but we're not always sure how. After all, marriage isn't always valued or understood or appreciated in our world. But what if marriage is more than a simple contract between two people? What if it's more than romance, mutual fulfillment, and attraction? What if woven into the very design of your humanity is a purposeful desire for you to be united with your beloved? To create something new together, something mysterious and holy? What if your marriage is designed to be a vital part of God's work in the world? As we begin this journey through God's plan for marriage, we're going to see that through the sacrament of matrimony, your love story is drawn ever more into the greatest love story of all, God's own love for us. And it's only in that love, and living according to that plan God has for our love, that we will find the happiness we long for in marriage.
There was something about Julie when we met that I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with.
It was funny, we met at a conference, a friend introduced us. I never thought I would actually see her again, but I fell in love on the spot.
I think in the last month especially, we've said multiple times together, like, I like you. Like, I like being married to you. This is so nice.
And I remember looking at him thinking, this is just a conversation between friends, just a conversation between friends. And I was like, oh no, he's really cute. Oh no, conversation between friends.
Dios nos había creado en su infinito amor para vivir esta vida juntos. Y era Jorge y yo desde toda la eternidad.
It was so obvious to me that, wow, this guy's fantastic. I really hope I see this guy again. I'd really like to get to know him more.
I got to know Greg more than I ever knew any other person I've ever even known, even more than friends. I just enjoyed hanging out with him.
Everything that I ever did never warranted the wonderful gift of matrimony.
When we discovered that there was something much greater than the two of us, our marriage became honeymoonal. And it remains honeymoonal. There's a joy, there's a desire to be together.
So you look at our life and you look at how we couldn't wait to not see each other. And now it's like I'll be gone to the grocery store and I can't wait to get home and be with him.
I think we had a reasonably good marriage for our first 25 years. I think we've had a really good marriage now that the Lord is front and center in our lives. It's changed everything for us.
It's not because you're worthy, it's because it's a gift. It's a flood of joy. In the midst of sorrow, a flood of joy.
When you think about it for what it is, how beautiful is that? That this God of all creation has called us to be together in this relationship to exemplify His love. And so much so that the responsibility we have is allowing each other to grow closer to Him so that they can one day spend eternity in heaven with God. Wow.
There is perhaps no other word in the English language, or maybe any language for that matter, that's so misunderstood and so often misused as the word love.
You're a love thief, you're a love thief, you're a love thief, you're a love thief.
Suppose the only education somebody had about the subject of love, right, the only education was from their radio. What would they learn about this thing that they're not sure what it is? Now that's a very interesting question, isn't it? Because if you were to listen to the radio, maybe every, third song would probably include the word love, maybe? And what is it we mean when we say love? What do we think love is? We get all these mixed ideas about love. What is it on earth we're talking about? Well, they might learn that it's in the air, right? Love is in the air. They might learn that this thing that's in the air is all you need. They might learn that apparently this thing that they need, which is in the air, stinks. Apparently, love stinks, right? And they might also learn what's it got to do with it? What's love got to do with it anyway? They would have a very confused understanding about this thing. But thankfully, God has placed within our hearts a yearning, burning, longing desire for a real love. It seems to me deep within our hearts, we kind of get it. And see, this is the one thing no one can complain about. If I tell you, you desire love, right? You can't say, don't try and box me in. You don't know me, right? Because we all we desire to be loved and we desire to love. There's no one out there saying, actually, I'm quite different. I'd rather be rejected and discarded all the days of my life and end up living in a one-bedroom apartment with 13 cats. None of us say that. There still remains within the human heart a desire for a love that is permanent and exclusive. And I think if any of us are honest, we would say that is the kind of love that we ultimately want.
One of the most romantic places that I've ever been is Paris, France. You know, and in Paris, they seem to have a corner on love, right? I mean, you see these sweet young couples kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. You see couples outside of a French bistro having a glass of wine. I mean, the romance is just, it's in the air, it's everywhere. You just get so excited about love itself, even if you just go by yourself. Paris just draws us into this place where we want to experience something romantic. There's actually this bridge in Paris where couples go and they bring with them a lock, something like this, right? And they'll take this lock and they'll attach it to the bridge, and they'll even take out the key and throw it over the bridge into the water. You know, it's this symbol of their undying love for one another. And that really speaks to me because we have this universal longing for love, right? I mean, people come all over the world to this bridge in Paris. It just makes me think that, you know, we all want love. We want to give love, we want to receive love, but not just any kind of love. It's a particular kind of love that we want. You know, it's something engraved in our hearts. When it comes down to it, we want a love that is forever, right? We want a love that will last. And not because the church says so, because it's been written upon our hearts. It's something that we want to give, we want to receive back. We want to give everything for that one person and that person to do the same in return. That's the type of love we're actually made for. It's just a part of being a human, right? It's how we've been created, is to give an everlasting love and to receive an everlasting love.
When a marriage is permanent, it brings a relationship to a whole new level. A man and woman can experience a much deeper, a more profound love. You see, when we don't have that lifelong commitment in a relationship, deep down we know that the other person isn't really committed to us as a person. They're just committed to what they may get out of us. And we may enjoy a lot of fun times together, but they're really more committed to those fun times or feelings or companionship or pleasure, but they're not really committed to me. And what happens when things get difficult in my life? Will this other person really be there for me in good times and in bad? In health and in sickness, when things don't go well? Will they be there for me when I'm not as beautiful as I used to be, or I'm not as successful as I used to be, or I'm not meeting this other person's expectations anymore?
So the idea of marriage, it was a little daunting because it's forever. I mean, marriage is permanent. I mean, think about it in your life. How many things do you really get involved in that are forever, right? I mean, for me, before I got married, the longest commitment I had was to my cell phone carrier.
I think we all need security. If we know that we're entering a relationship, a union, that we're not in for the long haul, guess what? We're all building our life rafts. We need the emotional and intellectual and psychological security of indissolubility in order to be all in. And if a marriage is blessed with children, that's also something the kids need. The kids need that stability. The children need to know that mom and dad are going to love each other no matter what, that union is going to be there.
Without that lifelong commitment, I really live in insecurity, in a certain fear, and I have to constantly be protecting myself. And when that's at the heart of a relationship, I'm not really going to be vulnerable with this other person, and I'm not going to let them really see me truly as I am, to see my weakness, my fears, the dark parts of my life. And that kind of self-protection, that kind of insecurity really hinders the kind of unity and love that God wants us to have in a marriage.
We all want permanent love, love that lasts. And that's only found in marriage. That is why marriage is so important. We have been called for this relationship, for this type of love. We are called to be in the commitment of love. We have been made for love.
You know, sometimes when I'm working, a moment pops out, an image, and it just hits me out of nowhere, and just one among all the others, and there it is, proof. Man, look at that smile. You can't fake something like that. That's the smile of someone in love. This is what we want. This is what we're made for. We're made for love.
One Wednesday, I come home, he greets me at the door, and he said, I am so tired. I said, I am too, I can't wait to go to bed in my own home. He said, no, you don't get it. I'm emotionally tired. I am done, I think we need to get a divorce. He said the word, and I agreed immediately. I mean, that's how we were living our lives. We were separate, you know, we had a house together, we had children together, but spiritually, we had nothing in common. We had grown so far apart because we had no clue what marriage was supposed to be. So we decided to do what we thought then was the best thing, and we called our 2 kids into the room, 7 and 9 years old. Said, Lauren and Christopher, you know, Mom and Dad just want to share something with you. Sometimes we're not meant to be together, and we are going to get a divorce. And regardless of the fact that they were huddled in the corner, holding each other, their bodies were shaking from the mere fact that we were ripping their lives apart. But we justified, because we were so miserable that when they grow up, we'll just send them to counseling, they'll be fine.
16 years ago, Julie and I found ourselves on the brink of divorce, and it was a result of us beginning to buy into the ways and lies of society. And we fell prey to those things, those different messages that did take us away. And the beauty in all this is that our church does have these beautiful teachings. But for us, and for whatever reason, we never received them. It wasn't there for us in marriage prep. My parents never gave it to us. We didn't hear it in the homily. And so what we had resorted to was that what the world had to say is what marriage was all about. And so that's the prescription we subscribe to, and that is the life that we begin to lead. And it is a life that is full of disaster, because everything the world has to say is that it's all about you. Find the love you want, the love that you want to keep, what makes you happy. And even as we're growing up, where do you want to go to school? What do you want to study? Where do you want to live? Who do you want to marry? How many kids do you want to have? And so everything that we learn in the world is all about us and what we want. And in kind of a twisted kind of way, those things became our God, because everything we said and did evolved around how we're going to get more stuff, how we're going to do more things. And when we could no longer find that happiness in other things, unfortunately, we began to look for it in other people. So infidelity became a big part of a marriage relationship. And so Julie made an appointment to see the tribunal vicar for the diocese.
And we went in to tell him for 45 minutes. We spilled our guts to him as to everything that we did wrong.
He did this, she did that, the whole infidelity. I mean, just literally everything. We just vomited upon this poor priest. And it was almost as if he was at a tennis match, just watching us volley the fault and blame back and forth. And he was awesome. He didn't say a word. He just sat there and listened to us. But as we were done, he leaned forward. He said, look, guys, I understand your plight and your situation, but let me ask you a few questions. What is God's plan for marriage? What does our church teach about the sacrament of marriage? What are some of the writings of St. Paul and the various Holy Fathers pertaining to the sacrament of marriage? And Julie and I looked at each other dumbfounded, shrugged our shoulders. We don't know, Father. We're Catholic, we go to church every Sunday, we used to be in love and now we're not. And we were simply hoping that you can show us how to get out of this. And he said, but what I suggest is that you go home and find some answers to the questions that I've asked before you make a final decision.
And thanks be to God, Greg did.
So I went home and didn't even know where the Bible was, but eventually found it and kind of dusted off. And in the 2 days of being home, didn't go to work or anything, just reading and absorbing this information.
The moment that he called me into the room and said, let me share with you what our church teaches about the sacrament of marriage. And he began to share with me, and then he moved on to God's plan, and my heart was on fire. And at that moment, I knew we had done it all wrong. The grace I felt was instant, because at that moment I wanted nothing more than to have an amazing and a wonderful marriage with this man. I know without a doubt that I am not perfect. I know he knows I'm not perfect, and yet he still chooses to love me. That is the gift.
Marriage isn't just a social convention. It's not a piece of paper, not a contract. It's the very thing we were made for. It's hardwired into us. It's the very reason we were made male and female.
Marriage is good for us. Marriage makes us happier. If we live a good marriage, we're going to have healthier lives. Think of all the different problems we have in society. Gangs, violence. The solution? Good marriage, strong families.
The Catechism tells us that God, who created man out of love, calls man to love and then refers to it as the fundamental and innate vocation of every human being. So it's not really surprising that the sociological evidence, our common experience of matrimony, when lived in accord with God's plan, would fit, would make sense, would be practical for us. The kind of security that comes from feeling that one is loved in a committed relationship just makes people happier. One survey of 14,000 adults over a 10-year period found that marital status was one of the most important predictors of happiness. Married men and women report less depression, less anxiety, and lower levels of other types of psychological distress than do those who are single, divorced, or widowed. In addition to that increased happiness quotient among marrieds, there are other clear advantages to committed marriage. 2 major national studies conducted in the early and late 90s found that married people enjoy more frequent and better quality sexual experiences than even single people do, and reported greater physical and emotional satisfaction with those experiences. As it turns out, love and commitment greatly heighten sexual pleasure, especially for women. Both men and women who are married enjoy higher incomes than singles. It's a great help, of course, to have 2 salaries and shared living expenses, but those who are married are not just better off because they can share, perhaps because of the stability that marriage encourages, or the sense that one is working for someone else, or perhaps just because of the happiness marriage breeds. Married people statistically tend to be better earners. Married couples and their intact families are more likely to be peaceful and less prone to violence than cohabiting situations or even second marriages. It seems that lower levels of commitment tend to raise the chance of violence in the home, and higher levels of commitment tend to lower violence. The advantage of committed marriage even includes enhanced lifespan. Both men and women live longer if they are married than if they are not. For men, staying married boosts the chance of surviving to age 65 from about 2 out of 3 to 9 out of 10. For women, wedlock ups the likelihood of surviving to old age from about 80 to more than 90%. So we've seen marriage corresponds to our heart's deepest desires for a lasting love. It also just works well. It's good for our lives, for our happiness, and for society. But now we're going to see something more. We're going to see how marriage is bound up with God's very plan for the world. Imagine being there that day when someone approached Jesus and asked about the questionable marriage practices of his own time. He came with a legal mindset. He wanted to know, what did the law say about marriage? But Jesus went beyond the question of law and had them consider something much more fundamental, something much more important. What did God plan for marriage? He brought them back to the beginning, to the very first book of the Bible. Have you not read that he made them from the beginning male and female, and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the 2 shall become one? And Jesus concluded, so they are no longer 2 but 1. What therefore God has joined, let no man put asunder.
So 2 key things stand out here. 1, God made human beings, male and female. And 2, He did this so that they could become one in marriage.
There are two ways that the Bible tells the story of creation. First, the Bible talks about everything that God created, the entire universe, with man and woman created in the image and likeness of God. Then the Bible zooms in on the man and woman in particular and how they were created to come together as one in marriage. Jesus references both of these points.
So the first creation story describes how God created the sun, the moon, the earth, the stars, the birds and the fish, all the creatures on the earth. But it culminates with the creation of the human person. God made them male and female.
Why does the Bible emphasize that human persons are made male and female? We can look around the world and see that animals are made that way so they can reproduce. But the Bible doesn't mention in the creation account male and female animals, male and female birds, male and female donkeys. But the Bible does go out of its way to highlight that human persons are made male and female. This tells us that God must have some special purpose in mind for making us this way, some special purpose that goes far beyond just reproduction.
That special purpose is the focus of the second creation account. At the climax of that telling, God creates Adam and Eve for each other, for this special purpose of marriage. At the very end of Genesis 2, we read the words, "Therefore a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, and the two become one flesh."
So Genesis 1 ends with them two, male and female. But Genesis 2 ends with them one, married as husband and wife.
There's a lot here in the Bible, probably a lot more than many of us ever imagined. But we're ready now to get to the heart of the matter. You see, the end of a story is where it all comes together. It's where we discover the purpose of the story. We've seen that the whole trajectory of these creation stories is marriage. At the climax of these accounts, we learn that God made us male and female so that we could be made one in marriage. God's goal for the whole world is achieved when He creates man and woman for each other in marriage.
And so our matrimonial love for each other is intended as a special sign of God's permanent and unfailing love for each human person. God creates the world out of love and with the intention of uniting each soul with Himself. And so marriage becomes a special sign of God's love for each one of us.
So we can see that marriage isn't just a way to regulate sexual activity or even just a matter of rights or self-expression or even just a matter of social convention.
In our married love for one another, we participate in something much bigger than the human affections we share or the honest desire to be united to the one we love. As wonderful as those things are, our married love is meant to be drawn up into God's own love.
More than anything else in the entire created world, marriage is a sign of that divine love. This is why our marriages matter. They matter so much. And this is why we want to do all we can to understand the meaning of marriage and understand how we can live more according to God's plan for this sacred union.
I have got to get this right.